The little girl's body went limp in her sister's arms. Clara Jennings felt the weight shift, felt Rosie's head fall back, felt her own knees buckle in the knee-deep snow. 5 days of walking, 5 days of hiding, 5 days of watching her baby sister fade away. And now, standing before a stranger's cabin in the howling Wyoming blizzard, Clara did something she'd sworn never to do again. She begged. "Please, mister, she's dying. I ain't got nobody else." If you want to see how one desperate knock changed 3 broken lives forever, stay with me until the end. Hit that subscribe button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Elijah Stone heard the sound over the screaming wind, a thump against his door. Then another. Weak. Human. He didn't move from his chair by the fire. Probably a branch, he told himself. Probably nothing. Nobody came this far up Thunder Creek anymore. Nobody had reason to. He'd made sure of that 5 years ago, when he'd buried Margaret and the son she'd been carrying, and told the whole world to leave him the hell alone. The thump came again, softer this time. Eli's jaw tightened. He stared into the flames, watching them dance the same way they danced every night for 1,800 nights. Same chair, same fire, same emptiness eating him from the inside out. Then he heard it. A voice. Small. Breaking. "Please." His boots hit the floor before his mind caught up with his body. He crossed the cabin in 4 strides and yanked the door open, ready to send whoever it was back into the storm. The words died in his throat. A girl stood on his porch. Couldn't have been more than 10, skinny as a fence rail, her face raw from wind and cold. She wore a dress that might have been blue once, but was now mostly patches and ice. Her arms cradled a smaller child, who hung limp as a rag doll, head lolled back, lips turning purple. "Please, mister." The older girl's voice cracked like breaking ice. "My sister, she's burning up. We've been walking 5 days. I can't feel her breathing right no more." Eli stared at them. His mind screamed at him to close the door, to protect himself, to remember what happened last time he let himself care about someone. But his hands were already reaching for the little one. "Get inside," he heard himself say. "Both of you. Now." The older girl stumbled through the doorway, nearly collapsed. Eli caught her with one arm while cradling her sister with the other. The small one weighed nothing, less than nothing, like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in frozen cloth. "Set her by the fire." He guided the older girl toward the hearth. "What's her name?" "Rosie. She's 5. I'm Clara." The girl's teeth chattered so hard she could barely form words. "Please don't let her die, mister. She's all I got left." Eli laid the little one on the braided rug before the fireplace. Her breathing came shallow and fast, her skin burning hot beneath his palm despite the ice crusting her hair. He'd felt this fever before, 5 years ago, on another cold night, in another woman's skin. The memory hit him like a fist to the chest. "How long's she been sick?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. 3 days. Started with sniffles, then the cough, then the fever came on." Clara crouched beside her sister, brushing ice crystals from Rosie's face with trembling fingers. "The mission folks said it was God testing her faith. Said if we prayed hard enough, she'd get better. But she just kept getting worse, and they wouldn't call no doctor, and I—" Her voice broke. She pressed her hand against her mouth, fighting back sobs. "I had to get her out of there, mister. I had to." Eli was already moving. He grabbed a tin cup, filled it from his water bucket, pulled down the jar of dried feverfew he kept for his livestock. His hands remembered the motions, even though his heart had sworn never to use them again. Steep the herbs, cool the water, test the temperature. "This'll taste bad," he told the little one, lifting her head gently. "But you gotta drink it. Can you do that for me?" Rosie's eyes fluttered open. Brown eyes, dark as creek water, glazed with fever. She looked at him without fear, without recognition, without anything except exhaustion so deep it made his chest ache. "Mama?" she whispered. Clara made a wounded sound. "No, sweetheart." Eli kept his voice steady. "But I'm going to help you feel better. Just drink this, all right?" She managed 3 swallows before turning her head away. Her eyes closed again, her breathing shallow but steadier than before. "That's enough for now." Eli set the cup aside and looked at Clara. Really looked at her for the first time. She was shaking violently, her lips blue, her dress plastered to her thin frame with melted ice. But what stopped him cold was the bruise along her jawline. Old, yellowing, but distinct. The shape of a man's fist. "Who did that to you?" The words came out like gravel. Clara's hand flew to her face. "It don't matter. We left." "It matters to me." "Why?" She met his eyes with sudden fierceness. "You don't know us. We ain't nothing to you. Just 2 orphan girls who showed up on your porch. Soon as Rosie's better, we'll be gone. You won't have to—" "I asked you a question." The authority in his voice stopped her cold. She stared at him, her jaw working, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. "Boy at the mission," she finally said. "Name was Garrett Wade. He was 22, but they kept him on to help manage the younger ones. She swallowed hard. "He wanted things from me, things I wouldn't give. When I said no, he said I needed to learn my place. Said nobody would believe an orphan over him anyway." Eli's hands curled into fists. "The mission folk know about this?" "They knew." Bitterness flooded Clara's voice. "They said I must have done something to encourage him. Said I needed to pray on my sins and be more humble." Her chin lifted. "That's when I knew we had to leave. I ain't staying nowhere that blames a girl for a man's cruelty." Something shifted in Eli's chest. Something he'd thought was dead and buried alongside Margaret. "You did right," he said quietly. "Getting her out of there, you did right." Clara's face crumpled, just for a moment. Then she pulled herself back together, that fierce pride rebuilding like a wall. "We just need somewhere warm for the night. Soon as the storm breaks, we'll head on. I heard there's families out west who take on workers. I can cook and clean and mend. I can earn our keep." "You're 10 years old." "I'm old enough to know we can't go back." The words hung in the air between them. Eli looked at this girl, this child with bruises on her face and steel in her spine, and saw something he recognized. The same desperate strength he'd felt after the funeral. The same refusal to break, no matter how much the world wanted you to. "Storm's not breaking tonight," he said finally. "Or tomorrow, by the look of it. You're staying here until it clears, and until your sister can walk on her own 2 feet. Clara's eyes went wide. "Mister, we can't—" "Name's Elijah. Eli. And you can. You will." He stood, his knees protesting after years of too little movement and too much whiskey. "There's a spare room I use for storage. Needs clearing out, but it's got a bed. You both need dry clothes, hot food, and sleep. In that order." "Why?" The question burst from Clara like it had been trapped behind her teeth. "Why would you help us? Nobody helps orphans for free. There's always something they want." Eli looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the wooden chest at the foot of his bed. The one he hadn't opened in 5 years. The one that held Margaret's nightgowns, her shawls, the blanket she'd been knitting for the baby who would never be born. His hands shook as he lifted the lid. "My wife died 5 years ago," he said, not looking at Clara. "Scarlet fever. She was 7 months along with our first child. Lost them both inside a week." He pulled out a nightgown, a shawl, his throat tight with memories that still cut like fresh wounds. "She had that same cough your sisters got. Same fever. Same way of looking at me like I could fix everything if I just tried hard enough." He turned back to Clara, holding out the clothes. "I couldn't save her. Couldn't save our son. Spent 5 years hiding from the world because I was too scared to care about anything again." He met her eyes directly. "But I ain't about to let a little girl die on my floor because I'm a coward. So you're staying. Both of you, and that's the end of it." Clara took the clothes with hands that trembled. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Mr. Eli." "Just Eli. Now get your sister out of those wet things. I'll step outside while you change." "You don't have to." "I know." He grabbed his tobacco pouch and headed for the door. "But I'm going to anyway." The cold hit him like a wall when he stepped onto the porch. Wind howled through the valley, driving snow sideways, obliterating everything beyond arm's reach. A proper blizzard, the kind that killed men and livestock and froze hope solid. Eli rolled a cigarette with shaking hands. The paper tore twice before he got it right. What in God's name was he doing? He'd built this life specifically to avoid moments like this. No connections, no responsibilities, no chances for loss. He'd fed his livestock, tended his land, and asked nothing of anyone. That was the agreement he'd made with himself the day he lowered Margaret into frozen ground. No more vulnerability. No more loving things he couldn't protect. And now 2 children sat in his cabin. Children who needed help. Children whose eyes held the same bone-deep grief he saw in his own mirror every morning. He smoked the cigarette down to his fingers, then rolled another. Inside, he could hear Clara's soft voice murmuring to her sister. The creak of floorboards, the rustle of fabric. Ordinary sounds that felt like earthquakes in his carefully controlled world. When he finally went back inside, Clara had changed Rosie into Margaret's nightgown. The garment swallowed the little girl completely, sleeves hanging past her hands, hem pooling around her feet. She looked like a ghost, a small, fever-flushed ghost lying on his floor. Clara had wrapped herself in the shawl, but still wore her damp dress underneath. Her posture was defensive, protective, like an animal expecting to be kicked. "Thank you," she said quietly. "We'll leave at first light. I promise we won't be trouble." "You'll leave when your sister can walk without falling over." Eli hung his hat on its peg. "Might be tomorrow, might be a week. Storm's got to break first anyway." He moved to the stove and started building up the fire. "You eat today?" "We had some bread this morning." "That's not what I asked." Silence. Eli glanced over his shoulder. Clara was staring at the floor, her arms wrapped around herself, shame written across her features. "There's salt pork in the larder and potatoes under the counter," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "Can you cook?" Her head snapped up. "Yes, sir. I can cook real good. At the mission, I helped in the kitchen every day. I know how to make stew and biscuits and—" "Stew's fine." He pulled down his dented pot. "You handle the food. I'll tend to your sister." They worked in careful silence. Clara moved around his kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to make herself useful young. She didn't ask where things were, just found them. Didn't chatter or fill the quiet with nervous words, just worked. Every few minutes, she'd glance toward Rosie, checking. Always checking. The stew was simmering when Rosie started to cough. a wet, rattling sound that seemed to shake her whole frame. Clara dropped the spoon and was at her sister's side before Eli could move. "Rosie? Rosie, baby, can you hear me?" The little girl's eyes opened, unfocused and glassy. "Clara?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Where's Mama?" Clara's face crumpled. "Mama's gone, sweetheart. Remember? She went to heaven with Papa." "I want Mama." Rosie's eyes filled with tears. "I don't feel good. I want to go home." "I know, baby, I know." Clara gathered her sister close, rocking her gently. "But we're somewhere safe now. This nice man is going to help you feel better. Can you be brave for me?" Rosie's gaze drifted to Eli, standing helpless by the stove. She studied him with that same intense, fever-bright focus. "You're sad," she said. Eli felt like he'd been punched. "What?" "Your eyes. They're sad like Clara's. Like you lost someone too." 5 years of walls. 5 years of careful isolation. And a 5-year-old with fever saw right through him in seconds. "Yeah," he heard himself say. "I lost someone." Rosie nodded solemnly. "Me too. But Clara says the people we love stay in our hearts. So they're not really gone, just different gone." Clara stroked her sister's hair, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "That's right, Rosie. That's exactly right." "Can you read me a story?" Rosie asked Eli, her eyes already starting to close again. "Mama used to read me stories when I was sick." His throat closed up. Margaret had wanted to do that, had talked about all the stories she'd read their children, all the books they'd share. "I don't know any children's stories." "That's okay. Any story. Just your voice. It's nice. Deep like Papa's." Clara met Eli's eyes over her sister's head. Something passed between them. An understanding. A recognition of shared loss and desperate hope. "I've got some books," Eli said roughly. "Might be too grown up for you, but—" "She just needs the sound," Clara said softly. "She just needs to know someone's there." So Eli pulled down his worn copy of Washington Irving and settled into his chair while Clara held her sister on the floor. He read about Rip Van Winkle in a voice rusty from years of disuse, stumbling over words that had once come easily. Rosie fell asleep before he finished the first page. But he kept reading anyway. Somewhere around midnight, Clara's head drooped against her sister's shoulder, and she slept too. Eli covered them both with a quilt he'd made with Margaret, then sat in his chair and watched them breathe. 2 children, in his cabin, depending on him. The terror of it nearly choked him. But underneath the terror was something else, something he'd thought was dead, something that felt almost like purpose. He stayed awake all night, watching over them, checking Rosie's fever every hour, adding wood to the fire, making sure they were warm and safe. It was the longest night of his life. It was also the first night in 5 years that he didn't wish for morning to never come. The storm howled for 3 more days. Eli had never been so grateful for bad weather in his life. It gave him an excuse to keep them, a reason beyond his own growing attachment. The passes were blocked, the roads impassable. They had to stay. Rosie's fever broke on the second morning. She woke clearer, hungry, asking for food in a small voice that made Eli's chest ache. "Can I have oatmeal?" she asked, peering at him from the nest of quilts Clara had made for her by the fire. "With honey? Mama used to make it with honey." "I don't have honey." Eli saw her face fall and felt something twist inside him. "But I've got molasses. Might be close enough." It wasn't close enough. He could tell by the way she ate it, politely, but without enthusiasm. But she ate it all, and that was what mattered. Clara watched every bite with fierce attention. Only after Rosie had finished did she allow herself to eat, shoveling food with the speed of someone who'd learned that meals could be taken away without warning. "Slow down," Eli said. "Nobody's going to steal it from you." Clara's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. Color flooded her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Nothing to apologize for." He refilled her bowl without asking. "Eat as much as you want. There's plenty." She stared at the second helping, like she'd never seen one before. Maybe she hadn't.
"Mr. Eli?
Rosie's voice piped up from her quilts.
Are you a real cowboy?"
"I was. Long time ago." He settled into his chair, watching the girls eat. Scouted for wagon trains heading west. Helped folks find safe passage through the mountains.
Did you fight outlaws?
Sometimes.
Did you ever shoot anybody?
"Rosie!" Clara looked horrified.
That's not a polite question. But I want to know.
Eli felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Almost a smile. He'd forgotten what that felt like. "I shot a few men," he admitted. "Only ones who needed shooting. Men who would have hurt the families I was protecting." Rosie considered this with serious attention.
That seems fair. If someone's going to hurt people you care about, you gotta stop them. Even if it means doing something hard.
Out of the mouths of babes. "That's right," Eli said. "Sometimes protecting people means doing hard things."
Is that why you let us in? Because we needed protecting?
The question hit him harder than any bullet ever had. He looked at this small girl with her fever-bright eyes and her too old understanding, and felt something crack open in his chest. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess it is." Clara was watching him with that same intense, assessing gaze she'd had since she arrived. Like she was waiting for him to reveal himself as a monster. Like she'd learned that kindness always came with a price. "We're grateful," she said carefully. "Truly. But you don't owe us anything. Soon as the storm breaks, we already talked about this." "I know, but—" She set down her spoon, her jaw tight. "I need you to understand something, Mr. Eli. We ain't charity cases. We ain't looking for pity or handouts. We've survived this long on our own, and we can keep surviving." "I don't doubt it." "Then why—" She broke off, frustration flashing across her features.
Why are you being so nice? What do you want from us?
Eli leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes meeting hers directly. "You want the truth?" "Yes." "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words for feelings he didn't understand himself. 5 years I've been out here alone. Told myself that was what I wanted. No connections, no complications, no chances for more loss. He looked at Rosie, who had fallen asleep again, her small face peaceful in the firelight. Then you showed up, desperate and scared and determined to save your sister no matter what. And I looked at you, and I saw... He stopped, swallowed hard. I saw everything I used to be, before I got too scared to care about anything. Clara's expression shifted. The wariness didn't disappear, but something else crept in alongside it. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "You lost your wife," she said quietly. "And your baby." "Yeah." "And you've been hiding ever since, punishing yourself for not being able to save them." The words hit him like hammer blows. No one had ever said it that plainly. No one had ever seen it that clearly. "How'd you get so smart?" he asked roughly. "Ain't smart." Clara's voice was bitter.
Just know what running from pain looks like. Watched enough adults do it at the mission. Watched myself do it too, after Mama and Papa died. Tried to make myself so useful nobody could throw me away. Thought if I was just good enough, helpful enough, somebody would want to keep me.
Her hands clenched in her lap.
But nobody ever did, so I stopped hoping. Stopped believing people could be kind without wanting something back.
She met his eyes.
You're making it real hard to keep believing that, Mr. Eli.
The fire crackled in the silence between them. Maybe, Eli said slowly, we're both ready to believe something different. Clara didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. And when she finally looked away, some of the tension had left her shoulders. It was a start. The storm broke on the fourth day, leaving the world crystalline and blinding white. Eli went out to check his livestock, found them alive but restless, his cow demanding attention with indignant moos. When he came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, he found Rosie standing at the window, her nose pressed against the glass.
It's beautiful, she breathed. Clara, look! Everything's covered in diamonds.
That's snow, Rosie.
I know it's snow, but look how it sparkles.
She turned to Eli with shining eyes.
Can we go outside, please? I've never seen so much snow in my whole life.
You were just sick 3 days ago.
But I feel better now. I feel lots better. Please, Mr. Eli?
She clasped her hands under her chin, her eyes impossibly wide, her lower lip jutting out in a practiced pout. Eli felt something loosen in his chest, something that might have been a laugh if he remembered how to make that sound. Just for a few minutes, he heard himself say. And you're wearing every piece of warm clothing I can find. Rosie squealed with delight and threw her arms around his legs. The contact startled him so much he nearly stepped backward. But he caught himself, looked down at this small person hugging him like he'd given her the world, and felt his eyes sting.
Thank you, thank you, thank you!
Clara watched from across the room, her expression complicated. But she didn't protest. And when Eli caught her eye, he could have sworn he saw her almost smile. They bundled Rosie in so many layers she could barely move, then stepped out into the transformed world. The snow came up past her waist, but she plowed through it with determined joy, catching handfuls and throwing them into the air.
Clara, Clara, look! I'm making snow angels!
She flopped backward into a drift, waving her arms and legs with abandon. Clara laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her before she could stop it. Eli watched them both, these two sisters who'd lost everything and still found joy in frozen water. Something in him shifted, settled, found its place. She's going to be fine, he said quietly, not entirely sure which sister he meant. Clara nodded, her eyes still on Rosie. She always bounces back. That's her gift. No matter what happens, she finds a way to be happy. What's your gift? Clara glanced at him, surprised by the question. I don't have one. That's not true. What then? Eli watched her watching her sister, saw the fierce protectiveness in every line of her body, the love that had driven her to carry a sick child through a blizzard to a stranger's door. You survive, he said. You keep going when anyone else would quit. You carry people who can't carry themselves. That's a gift, Clara. Don't let anyone tell you different. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She blinked them back, set her jaw, and looked away. That's just what you do, she said, when there's no other choice. No, Eli shook his head. That's what the strong ones do, the ones who deserve better than they've gotten. Clara didn't answer, but she stood a little straighter after that. And when Rosie demanded that she come make snow angels too, she went without protest, throwing herself into the snow beside her sister, with an abandon that seemed to surprise even her. Eli watched them until his hands went numb from the cold. 2 girls, laughing in his yard, wearing his dead wife's clothes, filling his silence with sounds he'd forgotten he needed. The passes would clear soon. The roads would open. They could leave any time they wanted. He should want them to leave. Should be counting the hours until his solitude returned. But standing there in the winter sunshine, listening to Rosie's bright laughter and Clara's softer echo, Eli realized he wasn't counting anything. He was hoping. For the first time in 5 years, he was hoping. And that terrified him more than any blizzard ever could. The days that followed took on a rhythm Eli hadn't expected, hadn't wanted, hadn't known he needed until it was already happening. Mornings started before dawn with him building up the fire, putting coffee on, checking that both girls still breathed in their sleep. He'd stand in their doorway longer than necessary, watching Clara curled protectively around Rosie, her arm draped across her sister even in sleep. Guardian, even in dreams. Then he'd go tend his animals, grateful for the familiar routine, the excuse to clear his head before facing another day of not being alone. But being alone had started to feel wrong. That was the part that scared him most. "Mr. Eli?" Rosie's voice found him in the barn on the 5th morning. Her small figure bundled in so many layers she looked like a walking quilt. "Clara says breakfast is ready. She made biscuits."
"They're not as good as Mama's, but she's learning. Don't let her hear you say that." "Say what?" "That they're not as good as your Mama's." Rosie's face scrunched in confusion. "But it's true. Mama's biscuits were the best in the whole world. Clara knows that." Eli set down his pitchfork and crouched to her level. "Sometimes people don't want to hear true things. Sometimes they just want to know you appreciate them trying." "Oh." Rosie considered this with the gravity only a 5-year-old could muster. "So, I should lie?" "No. You should say thank you for making breakfast, and then eat the biscuits. And if she asks how they are, you say they're real good." "But that's still lying." "No, that's being kind. There's a difference." Rosie's brow furrowed. "What's the difference?" Eli opened his mouth to answer, then realized he didn't rightly know. Margaret would have known. Margaret had known all the soft, complicated things about people that he'd never quite figured out. "The difference is," he said slowly, working it out as he spoke, "lying is trying to trick someone for your own benefit. Being kind is choosing words that help someone feel good about themselves. Your sister's trying real hard to take care of you. She don't need to hear that she's not as good as your mama. She needs to know you see her effort." Rosie absorbed this with solemn attention. "Okay, I think I understand." She reached for his hand, her small fingers wrapping around 2 of his. "Come on, breakfast is getting cold, and Clara gets worried when you're out here too long." "She does?" "Uh-huh. She watches the door. I asked her why, and she said she was just looking at the snow. But I know she's watching for you. She does that thing with her mouth when she's worried. The tight thing." Eli let himself be led toward the cabin, acutely aware of the small hand in his, the trust implied in that simple gesture. 5 days ago, this child had been dying on his floor. Now she was dragging him to breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world. Clara stood at the stove when they entered, her back to the door, but Eli saw her shoulders relax the moment she heard his boots on the floor. "Food's ready," she said without turning. "Rosie, wash your hands." "I already washed them." "Wash them again. You were in the barn." "But Mr. Eli's hands are dirty too." Clara turned then, and Eli caught the flicker of something in her eyes before she schooled her expression. Relief. She'd been worried about him. "Mr. Eli's a grown man," Clara said. "He can decide for himself about his hands. You're 5. Wash up."
Rosie huffed dramatically, but went to the water basin. Clara's eyes met Eli's over her sister's head. Everything okay with the animals? Fine. Cow's producing good. Chickens are laying. Good, that's good. An awkward silence fell. They'd been doing this dance for days now, circling each other with careful politeness, neither willing to acknowledge how quickly this temporary arrangement had started feeling permanent. Biscuits smell good, Eli offered. Clara's face flushed with pleasure she tried to hide. They're probably burned on the bottom. Stove runs hot. Mine always did that too. Margaret used to put a stone in the... He stopped abruptly, the name catching in his throat like a fishhook. Clara went very still. Your wife? Yeah. You can talk about her. If you want. I mean... Clara turned back to the stove, her movements jerky. You don't have to. But you can, if it helps. It wouldn't help. Talking about Margaret never helped. It just made the hole in his chest feel bigger, more impossible to fill. But Rosie was watching him with those big brown eyes, and Clara's shoulders were tight with tension, and somehow the words came out anyway. She used to put a stone in the bottom of the oven.
Said it helped even out the heat, kept the bottom from burning. Clara nodded slowly. Did it work? Yeah, it did. Maybe you could show me. Where to put it, I mean, if you don't mind. I don't mind. They ate breakfast in something approaching comfortable silence. Rosie chattered about the chickens she'd seen through the barn door, naming each one based on some characteristic only she could see. The brown one's Beatrice, because she walks fancy. And the spotted one's Henry, because he's bossy. And the little black one's Margaret, because... She stopped, her eyes going wide, her gaze darting to Eli. Because what? Clara asked carefully. Because she's pretty. Rosie's voice had gone small. But I can pick a different name, if that's not okay. I didn't mean... It's fine. Eli's voice came out rough. Margaret's a good name for a chicken. Rosie's face lit up. Really? You're not mad? I'm not mad. Clara said I shouldn't bother you about sad things. About your wife and the baby that died. She said you need time to heal, just like my heart needed time to heal after Mama and Papa went to heaven. Clara looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Rosie, I told you that in private. But Mr. Eli should know we understand, shouldn't he? Rosie turned those earnest eyes on Eli. We know about losing people. We won't make it worse. We promise. Eli's throat felt like he'd swallowed sand. This child, this tiny, fierce, too perceptive child, was trying to protect him. Trying to let him know she wouldn't hurt him with careless words or thoughtless reminders. Thank you, Rosie, he managed. That means a lot. You're welcome. She returned to her biscuit, with cheerful oblivion to the emotional wreckage she'd left in her wake. Can we go see the chickens after breakfast? I want to tell Margaret about her name. The chicken? Yes. She should know she's named after someone special. Eli looked at Clara, who shrugged helplessly, a small smile tugging at her mouth despite herself. Sure, he said. We can go see the chickens. The weeks that followed taught Eli things he'd forgotten he'd ever known. How to move through a house where other people lived. How to adjust his routines to accommodate smaller bodies and different needs. How to exist in proximity to other human beings without feeling like his skin was on too tight. Clara took over more of the household tasks without being asked, her competence both impressive and heartbreaking. No 10-year-old should know how to run a home this efficiently. No child should have needed to learn. You don't have to do all that, he told her one afternoon, finding her scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. It needs doing. I've been doing fine without it for 5 years. Clara sat back on her heels, pushing hair from her face with a wet hand. No offense, mister. Eli, but you've been living like a bear in a cave for 5 years. That ain't the same as doing fine.
He should have been offended. Instead, he felt his mouth twitch towards something like a smile. Bear in a cave? Rosie said it first. She said you were like the bears in the story Mama used to tell, the one who lived alone in the mountain until someone needed his help. Clara's voice softened. She thinks you're a hero, you know, for taking us in. I ain't a hero. I know. Heroes don't exist except in stories. Clara went back to her scrubbing with renewed intensity. But you're something close enough, and that's more than we've had in a long time. Eli stood there, useless and uncertain, watching this girl work herself to exhaustion because she didn't know any other way to prove her worth. Clara. Yeah? Stop scrubbing. Her hands stilled. But I'm not. I said, stop. He waited until she looked up at him, her expression wary. You don't got to earn your place here. You understand? You and Rosie. You're not guests I'm tolerating. You're not charity cases I'm enduring. You're... He struggled for words, hating his own awkwardness, wishing Margaret were here to say the soft things that came so hard to him. You're family now, or close enough. And family doesn't scrub floors to prove they deserve to eat. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She furiously blinked back. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because, her voice cracked. Because people say things they don't mean all the time, and then they change their minds. And then you're back where you started, except now it hurts worse, because you let yourself hope. Eli lowered himself to the floor, sitting across from her on the wet boards, not caring about his pants getting soaked. Who changed their mind on you? Everyone. The word came out bitter and broken. The neighbors who said they'd take us in after the funeral, then decided 2 orphans were too much trouble. The mission folk who promised we'd find a good home, then kept us locked up for 3 years. Every single person who looked at us with pity and walked away. She swiped angrily at her eyes. So forgive me if I don't just believe you when you say we're family. Words are easy, Mr. Eli. Anyone can say words. You're right. He met her gaze directly. Words are easy. So let me show you instead. Let me prove it, day by day, until you believe it. Can you give me that chance? Clara stared at him for a long moment, her jaw working, her hands twisted in her apron. Why do you even care? Why does it matter if we believe you? Because I know what it feels like. The admission scraped out of him raw and rough. To lose everyone. To have nobody. To convince yourself that being alone is safer than risking more pain. I've been living that way for 5 years, and I can tell you, it ain't living. It's just waiting to die while your heart rots inside you. He leaned forward. You and your sister walked into my life and made me remember what it felt like to care about something. That's a gift, Clara, whether you meant to give it or not. So yeah, I care if you believe me, because I need you to know this is real, for all of us. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of pain and fragile new hope. Okay, Clara finally whispered. Okay, I'll try. That's all I'm asking. She nodded once, then looked down at the floor between them and let out a shaky laugh. We're both going to be soaked now. Worth it. You're a strange man, Mr. Eli. So I've been told. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Eli sat by the fire with his thoughts. The cabin had changed around him in ways both small and profound. Clara's mending basket sat by his chair. Rosie's drawings were pinned to the wall, crude but enthusiastic pictures of chickens and mountains, and a tall, bearded figure she'd labeled Mr. Ely. A half-finished sampler Clara was working on lay folded on the shelf. Signs of life. Signs of people who lived here, who belonged here. He should have felt suffocated, should have felt his carefully constructed solitude crumbling around him. Instead, he felt something else entirely. Peace. The door to the girl's room creaked open, and Clara padded out, her feet bare, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Can't sleep?" he asked.
Rosie had a nightmare. She's settled now, but She hesitated by the fire. I didn't want to be alone.
"Sit." She took Margaret's chair, pulling her feet up beneath her, making herself small. For a while, neither of them spoke.
Mr. Eli?
"Yeah?"
Can I ask you something about your wife?
His chest tightened, but he nodded.
What was she like? I mean, really like? Not just that she died, but how she was when she was alive.
Nobody had asked him that in 5 years. Everyone who'd known Margaret had either died themselves or moved away, and strangers only wanted to know the tragedy, not the person. She was... He stared into the flames, searching for words that could hold the truth of her. She was fierce. Everyone thought she was sweet, and she was, but underneath that sweetness was pure steel. She argued with me about everything, made me defend my opinions, justify my choices. Wouldn't let me get away with half-formed thoughts or lazy thinking. Clara smiled slightly.
Sounds exhausting.
It was wonderful. His voice roughened. Nobody ever challenged me like she did. Nobody ever made me want to be better, just so I could deserve her good opinion. How'd you meet? Wagon train. She was traveling with her family, heading west for a new start. I was scouting for the group, supposed to keep my distance, stay professional. But she kept finding excuses to ride up front where I was. Ask me questions about the land, the route, the dangers. At first I thought she was just nervous, wanting reassurance. She wasn't? No. She was curious, genuinely interested in everything. Wanted to know how I tracked, how I read the weather, how I found water in places that looked bone dry. Smartest woman I ever met. And she wanted to know what I knew. Made me feel like I had something worth offering. Clara absorbed this quietly.
She sounds amazing.
She was. She really was.
I'm sorry you lost her.
The simple words, offered without pity or awkwardness, undid something in Eli's chest. He felt tears sting his eyes for the first time in years. Me too, he managed. Clara didn't say anything else. Didn't try to fill the silence with empty comfort. She just sat with him while the fire burned low. Two people who understood that some grief had no end, only pauses. Eventually, she yawned, exhaustion winning over emotion. Go back to bed, Eli said. I'll keep watch.
Watch for what?
Nothing. Everything. Just go sleep. She stood, but paused by his chair.
Mr.
Eli? Yeah? Thank you. For telling me about her. For trusting me with that. He looked up at this girl who'd had every reason to distrust the world and still reached out with compassion.
Thank you for asking.
For wanting to know her, not just what happened to her. Clara nodded, then did something that stopped his heart. She bent down and pressed a quick kiss to his forehead, the way a daughter might, the way Margaret had always kissed him goodnight. Then she was gone, her door clicking shut behind her, leaving Eli sitting alone with the ghost of that touch and a feeling he thought he'd never have again. Hope. The first sign of real spring came on a Thursday in late March, a full month after the girls had arrived. Eli woke to the sound of dripping water, icicles melting from the eaves, the world slowly loosening its frozen grip. Rosie noticed immediately.
Mr. Eli! Mr. Eli! The snow's crying!
He found her at the window, nose pressed to glass, watching droplets run down from the roof. "That's melting," he said. "Means spring's coming."
Already? But I like winter. Winter brought us to you.
The simple logic of children. Eli felt his chest tighten. "Spring'll be good too," he told her. "You'll see. Flowers come up, baby animals get born, everything turns green."
Will you show us? All the spring things?
"If you want."
I want.
She turned from the window and looked up at him with complete trust.
I want to see everything with you.
Clara appeared in the doorway, already dressed, already watching. She'd heard. He could tell by her expression, that complicated mix of hope and fear that seemed to live permanently in her eyes these days.
Storm will break soon, she said carefully. Passes will open.
I know.
Roads to town will be clear.
I know. She waited. He knew what she was asking without her having to say it. When the roads opened, they could leave. Find somewhere else. Stop being his burden. "Clara," he said, "come here." She approached warily. Rosie watched them both with solemn attention. "I meant what I said, about wanting you to stay. But I also know I can't force you. When those roads open, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. I'll give you supplies, money, whatever you need to start fresh somewhere else." Clara's face flickered with emotions too fast to read.
You'd really let us go?
"It wouldn't be my place to stop you. You ain't prisoners here. You got a right to choose your own path."
But you don't want us to go.
"No." The word came out rough and honest. "I don't want you to go. But what I want doesn't get to override what you need. That's how it works when you care about someone. You put their needs first, even when it hurts." Rosie tugged on his sleeve.
Mr. Eli?
"Yeah, little one?"
I don't want to go. I like it here.
"I like you and the chickens, and Clara's not as scared anymore, and everything feels safe." Her voice wobbled slightly.
Is it okay if we stay? Please?
Eli looked to Clara, letting the decision be hers. She was the older one, the protector, the one who'd carried her sister through impossible circumstances. She'd earned the right to choose. Clara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She looked at Rosie, then at Eli, then around the cabin that had somehow become home.
We'll stay, she said quietly. If you really mean it. If this isn't just words.
It's not just words. I swear it.
Then we'll stay.
Her voice strengthened.
We'll stay, and we'll help with the homestead, and we'll...
She faltered, uncertainty creeping back in.
What do we do now? I don't know how this works. Being somewhere permanent. Having someone who actually wants us.
Eli reached out and put his hand on her shoulder, the first time he'd initiated contact. We figure it out together, he said, day by day. That's how you build anything worth having. Clara nodded, blinking hard. Rosie threw her arms around both of them, her small body vibrating with joy.
We're a family, she announced. A real family. Clara, we're a family.
Clara laughed, a wet, broken sound that held more relief than humor.
Yeah, Rosie, I guess we are.
Eli stood there, wrapped in the embrace of two girls he hadn't known existed 2 months ago, and felt the last frozen parts of his heart begin to thaw. The spring that followed was the busiest Eli had experienced in years. Fields needed plowing, fences needed mending, the garden needed planting, and everything required more hands than he had. But now he had more hands. Clara threw herself into the work with fierce determination. She wasn't strong enough for heavy labor, but she learned to handle the lighter tasks with efficiency. Feeding animals, collecting eggs, weeding the garden, cooking meals that actually tasted like someone gave a damn. Rosie helped in her own way, mostly by staying out of trouble and entertaining herself while the adults worked. She'd claimed the chicken coop as her special domain, spending hours talking to the birds, collecting eggs with reverent care, making up elaborate stories about their lives and adventures. "Margaret laid 2 eggs today," she reported one evening at dinner. "She's very proud. I told her she was doing an excellent job." "The chicken," Clara clarified unnecessarily. "Yes, the chicken. Mr. Eli, do chickens know when they're doing a good job? Like, do they feel proud?" "I don't rightly know. Never asked one." "Maybe you should. Maybe they're waiting for someone to ask." Clara snorted into her stew. Eli felt his mouth twitch. "I'll keep that in mind." "Will you teach me to ride a horse?" The question came out of nowhere, Rosie's face suddenly serious. "Papa was going to teach me before he got sick. He promised. But then he went to heaven, and nobody ever taught me." The request hit Eli somewhere deep and tender. He thought of all the things he'd planned to teach his own child, the son who'd never drawn breath. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "I can teach you." Rosie's face lit up like sunrise. "Really? When? Tomorrow? Can we start tomorrow?" "Let's wait for the mud to dry. Don't want the horse slipping. But soon." "Okay, soon is good. Soon is very good." She bounced in her chair with barely contained excitement. "Clara, did you hear? Mr. Eli's going to teach me to ride." "I heard, Rosie." "Maybe he can teach you too. Then we can all ride together. Like a real family going on adventures." Clara met Eli's eyes across the table. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of how much had changed, how quickly. "Maybe," Clara said softly. "That sounds nice." Teaching Rosie to ride turned out to be one of the most terrifying experiences of Eli's life. She was fearless, which was the problem. No sense of her own mortality. No understanding that horses were large animals that could kill you if spooked. She wanted to gallop before she could walk. Wanted to jump before she could trot. Wanted everything immediately. "Slow down," Eli said for the 100th time, keeping a firm grip on the lead rope while Rosie sat atop Old Bell. "You gotta learn control first." "But this is boring. I want to go fast." Going fast comes after going safe. You want to know what happens to people who skip the safe part? They fall off? They fall off. And sometimes they break bones. Sometimes worse. Rosie considered this. "Did you ever fall off a horse?" "More times than I can count." "Did you break bones?" "Cracked a few ribs once. Sprained my ankle twice. Knocked my head hard enough to see stars." Her eyes went wide. "Stars? Like the nighttime stars?" "Different stars. The kind that mean your brain's rattled. It's not pleasant." "Oh." She gripped the saddle horn a little tighter. "Maybe slow is okay for now." "That's what I thought." Clara watched from the fence, her expression a complicated mix of anxiety and amusement. Every time Rosie wobbled, Clara tensed. Every time she steadied, Clara relaxed. She'd probably lived through 1,000 small deaths in the past hour. "You doing okay over there?" Eli called to her. "Fine. Just wondering how many gray hairs I'm going to have by sundown." "She's doing good. Natural seat. Good hands. She'll be a fine rider once she learns patience." "Patience isn't exactly her strong suit." "Neither was mine at her age. She'll grow into it." Later that evening, after Rosie had talked herself hoarse, recounting every moment of her lesson to anyone who'd listen, Eli sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Clara joined him, lowering herself onto the step beside him.
"Thank you," she said quietly, "for teaching her. It meant more than you know."
She's a good student when she's not trying to gallop off into the sunset. Clara smiled slightly.
She's always been like that. Wants everything at once. Mama used to say she was born impatient, came out crying and ready to run.
What about you? What were you like as a baby?
Quiet. Too quiet, Mama said. She worried something was wrong with me because I never fussed. Just watched everything with big eyes and said nothing.
Some things don't change. Clara huffed a small laugh.
I talk more now.
You do, I've noticed. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned orange, then pink, then purple.
Mr. Eli?
Yeah?
I've been thinking about what you said, about building things day by day.
What about it? She turned to look at him, her face serious in the fading light.
I want to learn to read better, write better too. The mission taught us some, but not much. They said girls didn't need book learning, just Bible verses and household skills.
What do you want to read?
Everything.
Anything. I want to understand the world. I want to be smart enough that nobody can trick me or take advantage of me. I want to be able to teach Rosie proper, better than I can now. Eli nodded slowly. I've got books. Not many, but some. History, geography, bit of philosophy. They're not children's books. I don't want children's books. I want real books. The kind that teach you things that matter. All right. We can start tomorrow night, after chores. An hour of reading and lessons. If you're serious. I'm serious. Then we'll do it. Clara's face broke into a smile. The first truly unguarded smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her features, made her look her age instead of decades older.
Thank you, Mr. Eli. Thank you for believing I'm worth teaching.
Don't thank me yet. I'm a rough teacher. Margaret always said I expected too much, pushed too hard.
That's okay. I've never had anyone expect anything of me before. I think I might like it.
She stood, brushed off her dress, and headed inside. At the door, she paused.
Mr. Eli?
Yeah?
I'm glad we knocked on your door, even though I was scared, even though I didn't know what would happen. I'm glad we found you.
Eli's throat tightened. I'm glad you found me too, Clara. More than you know. She nodded once, then disappeared inside. Eli sat on the porch until full dark, watching stars appear one by one, thinking about families and fate and the strange turns life could take. 2 months ago, he'd been waiting to die. Now he had 2 daughters, a purpose, and something terrifying and wonderful that felt suspiciously like hope. Spring had come in more ways than one, and for the first time in 5 years, Eli Stone found himself actually looking forward to what came next. The peace lasted 6 more weeks. Eli should have known better, should have remembered that happiness was just the quiet before the storm, but he'd let himself forget, let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, life had finally decided to stop punishing him. He was teaching Clara arithmetic at the kitchen table when the rider appeared. Rosie spotted him first, her sharp eyes catching movement through the window.
Someone's coming.
Eli was on his feet before she finished speaking, his hand reaching for the rifle he kept by the door. Clara's face went pale, her body tensing like a hunted animal. Get your sister, Eli said quietly. Go to your room. Stay there until I tell you otherwise.
Mr. Eli.
Now, Clara. She grabbed Rosie and disappeared. Eli heard their door close, heard Clara pushing something heavy against it. Smart girl, always thinking. He stepped onto the porch with the rifle loose in his hands, watching the rider approach. The man was young, early 20s, with a mean look about him that Eli recognized immediately. He'd seen that look on men who enjoyed causing pain, who mistook cruelty for strength. The rider stopped his horse 10 feet from the porch, but didn't dismount. "You Elijah Stone?" "Who's asking?" "Name's Garrett Wade. I'm looking for 2 girls, runaways from the Pinewood Mission. Word is you got them." Eli felt something cold and dangerous settle in his chest. This was him. The one who'd hurt Clara. The one who'd made her face afraid of touch. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me, old man." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "I tracked them this far. Ain't hard to follow 2 kids through winter country. Trail leads right to your door. Lot of folks pass through here. Don't mean I got them." "Then you won't mind if I take a look inside." Eli raised the rifle slightly, not pointing it, not yet, but making sure Garrett saw it clear. "I mind. This is my property. You got no authority here." "I got authority from the mission. Those girls are wards of Pinewood. They belong to us until they're of age. Harboring runaways is a criminal offense, Mr. Stone. You really want to add that to your troubles? What I want is for you to turn that horse around and ride back where you came from. Whatever quarrel you got with those children, it ain't none of my concern." Garrett's face twisted with ugly anger. "Those girls made me look bad. Made the mission folk think I couldn't handle a couple of orphan brats. I got a reputation to protect." "Your reputation ain't my problem." "It will be." Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. "One way or another, I'm taking them back. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard. But either way, I'm leaving here with those girls." Eli raised the rifle now, pointed it straight at Garrett's chest. "Get off my land." "You think that scares me? You think you're the first man to point a gun at me?" "I think I'm the first man who means it." "You got 10 seconds to turn around before I put a hole in you." Garrett's eyes flickered. Eli saw the calculation happening, the weighing of odds. Finally, the younger man pulled back on his reins. "This ain't over, Stone. Not by a long shot. Those girls are coming back to Pinewood if I have to burn this whole place down to get them." He wheeled his horse and rode away, disappearing over the ridge. But his words hung in the air like smoke. Eli waited until he was gone, then waited some more, his eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of ambush. Only when he was certain they were alone did he lower the rifle and go inside. Clara was standing in the main room, white as death, her arms wrapped around Rosie so tight the little girl was squirming. "He found us," Clara whispered. "I knew he would. I knew we couldn't hide forever." "Clara, listen to me. We have to go. We have to leave, now, tonight, before he comes back. He'll hurt you, Mr. Eli. He'll hurt you to get to us, and I can't let that happen. I can't—" "Clara." Eli crossed the room and knelt before her, taking her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You ain't going anywhere. Neither of you." "But he said—" "I don't care what he said. This is your home now. I'm not letting some jumped-up bully drive you out." "You don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of." "I know exactly what he's capable of. I've been dealing with men like him my whole life. They're cowards at heart, Clara. They prey on the weak because they're afraid to face someone who might fight back." Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. "But what if he hurts you? What if he burns the barn like he said? What if—" "Then we rebuild. We start over. We do whatever we have to do. But we don't run." He squeezed her shoulders gently. "You've been running your whole life. It's time to stop. It's time to stand and fight for something worth keeping." "I don't know how to fight." "Then I'll teach you. I'll teach you both." Rosie had been silent through the whole exchange, her face buried in Clara's dress. Now she looked up at Eli with eyes that held too much understanding for a 5-year-old.
The bad man wants to take us back to that place. The place where Clara got hurt.
Yes, sweetheart, he does.
But you won't let him.
No, I won't. Rosie nodded solemnly, then walked to Eli and climbed into his arms. She wrapped herself around him, her small heart beating fast against his chest.
I'm scared, she admitted quietly. But I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too. Clara stood watching them, tears streaming down her face, her whole body trembling with fear and relief and emotions too big to name. Eli reached out his free hand to her. Come here. She came. She let him hold her while she cried, let herself be small and scared and protected for the first time in longer than she could remember. We're going to be okay, Eli told them both.
I promise. Whatever happens, we face it together.
That night, Eli didn't sleep. He sat by the window with his rifle across his lap, watching the darkness for any sign of movement. Clara stayed up with him for hours before exhaustion finally claimed her, falling asleep in the chair across from him with a quilt pulled up to her chin. He watched her sleep and felt a fierce, terrible love burning in his chest. This girl who'd trusted him with her life, her sister's life, everything she had. He'd die before he let Garrett Wade touch either of them. The next morning, he made a decision. I'm riding into town, he told Clara over breakfast. Need to talk to some folks about what's happening.
Can't we come with you?
Not this time. I need you to stay here. Keep the doors locked, the rifle loaded. Can you shoot?
Papa taught me some, before he died.
Good. If anyone comes before I get back, anyone at all, you put a warning shot over their heads. If they keep coming, you aim for center mass and you don't hesitate. Understand? Clara's face was pale, but her jaw set with determination.
I understand.
I'll be back before dark, I promise. The ride into town took 2 hours. Eli spent every minute thinking about Garrett Wade, about the mission, about the law and what it could and couldn't protect. By the time he reached Silver Falls, he had a plan. His first stop was the general store, where Martha Perkins held court behind the counter, like she'd been doing for 30 years. Elijah Stone. Well, I never. Thought you'd gone full hermit up there in your valley. Martha, I need to talk to you. Something in his tone made her straighten. What's wrong? You heard about the 2 girls I took in? The orphans from Pinewood?
Heard plenty. Some folks say you've lost your mind. Others say it's about time you rejoin the living.
Her eyes sharpened.
Which is it?
The mission sent someone to take them back, a man named Garrett Wade. He threatened to burn me out if I don't hand them over. Martha's expression darkened.
Garrett Wade. I know that name. Nothing good attached to it.
He hurt the older girl, Clara. That's why they ran.
Lord have mercy.
Martha came around the counter, her maternal instincts clearly roused.
Those poor children. And now he's hunting them down like animals?
I'm not letting him take them. But I need help, Martha. Legal help, community help, whatever kind of help I can get.
You came to the right place.
Martha grabbed her shawl from its hook.
Let me get Sheriff Dawson and Reverend Miller. We're going to figure this out together.
Within an hour, Eli sat in the back room of the church with half a dozen of Silver Falls' most respected citizens. Sheriff Dawson, a weathered man with a lawman's careful eyes. Reverend Miller, younger than expected, but with a steel spine beneath his gentleness. Doc Patterson, who delivered half the children in the county. Martha Perkins, who knew everyone's business and wasn't afraid to use that knowledge. And Thomas Reed, the town's only lawyer, who'd come out of retirement when he heard what was happening. The mission has legal custody of those children, Reed explained, shuffling through papers. That's the law. But there are provisions for transfer of guardianship, especially in cases of abuse or neglect. How do we prove abuse? Eli asked. The girl's testimony, any physical evidence, witnesses who can speak to the conditions at Pinewood. Clara's got a scar on her jaw where he hit her, and she told me what happened, what he tried to do to her. Reverend Miller's face went red with anger. That's enough for me. No child should have to endure such treatment. The question is whether it's enough for a judge, Reed said, and whether we can get a hearing before Garrett Wade does something drastic. He threatened to burn my place down. Sheriff Dawson spoke for the first time.
He said that directly? Those exact words?
Near enough. Said he'd burn the whole place down to get them.
That's a criminal threat. I can arrest him for that. Hold him while we sort out the legal situation.
Dawson stood. Where's he staying?
Don't know. He rode off toward the East Ridge.
I'll find him. Dawson checked his pistol. Thomas, you start the paperwork for emergency guardianship. I want those children legally protected before sundown.
I'll need Eli's statement, and the girls when possible.
You'll have it. Martha put her hand on Eli's arm.
Those girls are staying with you, Elijah Stone, whatever it takes. This community takes care of its own, and those children are ours now. They've only been here 2 months. Doesn't matter. You took them in. That makes them family. And we protect family in Silver Falls. Eli felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying without realizing it. He wasn't alone in this.
These people, this community he'd shut himself away from for 5 years. They were standing with him. Thank you, he said roughly. All of you. I don't know how to repay. Nothing to repay, Doc Patterson interrupted. We're just doing what neighbors do. What you'd do for any of us if the situation was reversed. Would I? 5 years I've been up in that valley, not asking for help, not offering any. Doesn't matter. You're here now. That's what counts. The meeting broke up with plans in place. Sheriff Dawson would track down Garrett Wade. Thomas Reed would file for emergency guardianship. Martha would organize the women of the town to help with supplies and support. Reverend Miller would reach out to other churches in the area, building a network of people willing to speak against Pinewood's practices. Eli rode home with a heart lighter than it had been in days, but still watchful. Garrett was out there somewhere, angry and humiliated, looking for a way to reassert his power. Men like that didn't give up easily. Clara met him at the door with the rifle in her hands and terror in her eyes.
I heard horses. I thought...
Just me. He took the rifle gently. Everything's okay. I talked to people in town. They're helping us.
Helping us? Why would they do that?
Because that's what communities do. They look after each other. Clara's face showed disbelief warring with hope.
Nobody ever helped us before. Not really.
Things are different now. He led her inside, checking out of habit that Rosie was safe. The little girl was curled up by the fire with a book, pretending to read, her eyes tracking the pictures. The sheriff's going after Garrett. A lawyer's filing papers to make me your legal guardian. And half the town's ready to stand up and say you belong here with me.
They do that? For us?
They already are. Clara sat down heavily, her legs seemingly unable to hold her.
I don't understand. We're nobody. We're just orphans.
You're not nobody. Eli crouched before her, making sure she heard every word. You're Clara Jennings. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You carried your sick sister through a blizzard to a stranger's door because you refused to let her die. You survived years of neglect and abuse and came out fighting. You're somebody, Clara. You've always been somebody. Tears spilled down her cheeks.
Sometimes I don't feel like somebody.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just trying to keep from disappearing. I know that feeling. I lived it for 5 years. He took her hands in his. But you're not going to disappear. I won't let you. This town won't let you. You matter, Clara. Your life matters. And I'm going to keep saying it until you believe it. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. Years of fear and loneliness pouring out in a flood. Eli held her and let her cry, knowing this was what she needed, what she'd probably needed for years. Rosie came over and wrapped her arms around both of them, her small face serious. Why is Clara sad? She's not sad, sweetheart. She's relieved. What's relieved? It's when you've been scared for a long time, and then you find out you don't have to be scared anymore. All that fear has to go somewhere, so it comes out as tears. Rosie considered this. So, crying can mean happy? Sometimes, yeah. That's confusing. Life's confusing sometimes. Clara pulled back, wiping her face, managing a watery smile. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart. Stop apologizing. You're allowed to feel things. I know. I'm not used to it being safe to feel things. Get used to it. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. Sheriff Dawson sent word that he'd tracked Garrett Wade to a camp east of town, but hadn't made contact yet. Thomas Reed filed the emergency guardianship papers and sent them to the circuit judge, who was expected in Silver Falls within the week. Eli kept the girls close, didn't let them out of his sight. Clara learned to shoot properly, her natural steadiness making her a better marksman than most grown men. Rosie practiced her letters with fierce determination, as if learning to read was somehow a weapon against the darkness closing in. On the 5th night, Eli woke to the smell of smoke. He was out of bed and through the door before fully conscious, his mind screaming what his nose already knew. Fire. Something was burning. The barn. Flames licked up the walls, catching on dry wood, spreading faster than seemed possible. In the orange glow, Eli saw a figure on horseback, watching from the tree line. Garrett Wade. Had to be. Clara, get your sister! Stay in the house! He ran for the barn, grabbing a bucket from the well on the way, knowing even as he did that it was hopeless. The fire was too far gone. But his cow was in there, his horse, animals that depended on him. He kicked open the barn door and plunged into hell. Smoke filled his lungs. Heat seared his skin. He found the cow first, eyes rolling white with terror, and cut her loose. She bolted past him into the night air. The horse was harder. Old Belle had backed into her stall, frozen with fear, refusing to move despite the flames closing in. Eli grabbed her bridle, spoke calming words that his own racing heart didn't believe, and finally got her moving, dragging her toward the door. They burst into the open air just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. Eli fell to his knees, coughing smoke, his eyes streaming. Through blurred vision, he saw Clara on the porch with the rifle raised, Rosie hiding behind her. He saw his barn, his livelihood, his security, going up in flames. And he saw Garrett Wade, sitting on his horse at the tree line, silhouette against the fire, watching his handiwork with satisfaction. Something inside Eli snapped. He was on his feet and running before he knew what he was doing, running toward the man who had destroyed his barn, threatened his family, hurt his daughter. Running with nothing but his fists and 5 years of grief-fueled rage. Garrett saw him coming and spurred his horse forward, meeting the charge. He had a knife in his hand, gleaming in the firelight. Should have given them up when you had the chance, old man. Eli grabbed for the bridle, missed, took a kick from the horse that sent him sprawling. He rolled and came up just in time to dodge the knife slash that would have opened his throat. Garrett dismounted, circling. I'm going to enjoy this. Gonna beat you bloody, then drag those girls back to Pinewood by their hair. Maybe I'll make the older one watch while I—" Eli didn't let him finish. He launched himself at Garrett with a snarl, taking them both to the ground. They rolled in the mud, trading blows, grappling for the knife. Garrett was younger, stronger, but Eli was fighting for everything that mattered. He got his hand on the knife, twisted, felt Garrett's wrist snap. The younger man screamed and dropped the weapon. Eli kicked it away and drove his fist into Garrett's face. Once, twice, 3 times. "Mr. Eli, stop!" Clara's voice cut through his rage. He looked up to see her running toward them, the rifle still in her hands, terror on her face. "Stop! You'll kill him!" Eli looked down at Garrett's bloody face, at his own hands covered in the man's blood, and felt the rage drain away, leaving something cold and hollow in its place. He stood, backing away from Garrett's groaning form. "Tie him up," he told Clara. "Use the rope from the well." Is he going to die?" "No, unfortunately." Clara ran for the rope while Eli stood guard, watching Garrett try to crawl away with his broken wrist cradled against his chest. "You're done," Eli told him quietly. "You hear me? This is over. You come near my family again, I won't stop next time. I'll put you in the ground and sleep peaceful knowing I did." Garrett spat blood. "This ain't over. The mission's being investigated. Sheriff told me yesterday. Seems you're not the only one who hurt children there. A lot of people are going to prison, Garrett, starting with you." For the first time, real fear showed in Garrett's eyes. "You can't prove nothing." "I don't have to. Clara can. And she will. Every bruise, every threat, every time you laid hands on her. She's going to tell it all to the judge, and you're going to rot." Clara returned with the rope, her hands shaking, but her jaw set. She helped Eli tie Garrett securely, while Rosie watched from the porch, her small face pale in the dying firelight. By the time Sheriff Dawson arrived, alerted by the smoke visible for miles, the barn was ashes. Garrett was secured, and Eli's hands had stopped shaking. "Hell of a night," Dawson said, surveying the damage. "Hell of a man," Eli replied, jerking his head toward Garrett. "Caught him setting the fire. Tried to kill me when I confronted him." Dawson looked at Garrett's battered face, then at Eli's bloody knuckles. "Looks like he got the worse end of that fight." "He did. Can't say I'm sorry about that." Dawson hauled Garrett to his feet. "Garrett Wade, you're under arrest for arson, assault, and whatever else I can think of between here and the jail. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it." As Dawson dragged Garrett away, Clara came to stand beside Eli. She slipped her hand into his, her fingers cold but steady. "It's really over?" "Yeah, it's really over." She leaned her head against his arm. "I was so scared. When I saw the fire, when I saw you fighting him, I thought I was going to lose you. Can't get rid of me that easy." "Promise?" Eli looked down at this girl, who'd become his daughter in every way that mattered. At the smoldering ruin of his barn, at the life they built together rising from the ashes. "I promise." Rosie appeared at his other side, worming her way under his arm. "Mr. Eli?" "Yeah, little one?" "You were very brave, fighting the bad man." "I was very angry. That's not the same as brave." "It looked brave to me." She yawned hugely. "Can we go inside now? I'm tired, and the fire made everything smell bad." Despite everything, Eli felt himself smile. "Yeah, let's go inside." The 3 of them walked back to the cabin together, leaving the ruins of the barn behind. They'd rebuild. They'd start over. They'd do whatever they had to do. But they'd do it together. And that made all the difference. The morning after the fire, Eli woke to the sound of wagons. He grabbed his rifle and was at the window before his eyes fully opened, his heart hammering with the memory of flames and Garrett's twisted face. But what he saw through the glass stopped him cold. Wagons, 4 of them, rolling up his drive loaded with lumber, tools, supplies. Men on horseback flanking them. Women and children crowded onto benches. Half of Silver Falls, it seemed, making their way toward his ruined property. "Mr. Eli?" Clara appeared at his elbow, sleep-rumpled and alarmed. "What's happening?" "I don't know." Martha Perkins's voice rang out from the lead wagon. "Elijah Stone, you planning to stand there gawking all day, or are you going to come help us rebuild your barn?" Eli stepped onto the porch, the rifle forgotten in his hands. He counted faces. Doc Patterson, Reverend Miller, the blacksmith whose name he'd never learned, farmers he recognized from town, women carrying baskets of food, children running between wagons, excited by the adventure. "What is this? What's it look like?" Martha climbed down from her wagon with surprising agility for a woman her age. "Community barn raising. We heard what happened. Figured you could use some help." "I didn't ask for help." "No, you didn't. That's the problem with you, Elijah. You never ask." She marched up to him and poked him in the chest with one bony finger. "Well, too bad. You're getting it anyway. Now put that rifle down and point us toward the best ground for building." Clara had come out onto the porch, Rosie hiding behind her legs. Martha's expression softened when she saw them. "And these must be the famous Jennings sisters. I'm Martha Perkins. I run the general store in town, and I've been hearing good things about you two." "Good things?" Clara's voice was weary. "That you're smart, hard-working, and brave as any grown woman I know. That you survived things no child should have to survive, and came out fighting." Martha smiled warmly. "I'd say those are pretty good things." Rosie peeked out from behind Clara. "Are you nice?" "I try to be. Are you hungry? I brought biscuits. Real ones, not the kind men make when they're pretending they can cook." "I heard that," Eli muttered. "You were meant to." Martha held out her hand to Rosie. "Come on, little one. Let's go find those biscuits, while the menfolk figure out where to put things." Rosie looked up at Clara, who nodded slowly. Then she took Martha's hand and let herself be led toward the wagons, glancing back only once to make sure Clara was still there. "She'll be fine," Martha called over her shoulder. "I raised 6 children and didn't lose a single one. She's safe with me." Clara watched them go, her face unreadable. Eli came to stand beside her. "You okay?" "I don't understand. Why are they doing this? They don't know us." "They know enough. They know you're children who needed help. They know I'm a man who needed a reason to keep living. That's enough for folks like this." "But the cost, all that lumber, the supplies, the time." "That's what community means, Clara. People helping each other without keeping score." She shook her head slowly. "I've never seen anything like this." "Neither have I. Not for a long time." The work began within the hour. Men who'd built barns before took charge, organizing teams, assigning tasks. Eli found himself swept up in the rhythm of communal labor, lifting beams alongside men he'd barely spoken to in 5 years, following instructions from a blacksmith who seemed to know exactly how a barn should be put together. Clara tried to help with the building, but Martha redirected her to the food preparation, where a dozen women had set up a makeshift kitchen. "You'll learn more useful skills here than hauling lumber," Martha told her. "Besides, those men need feeding, and that's important work too." "I know how to cook." "I don't doubt it, but do you know how to cook for 30 people? That's a different skill entirely. By midday, the frame of the new barn was taking shape. Eli stood back during the lunch break, watching his neighbors eat and laugh and plan the afternoon's work, and felt something he'd almost forgotten: belonging. Doc Patterson appeared at his elbow with a plate of food. "You need to eat something. Can't build a barn on an empty stomach." "I still don't understand why you're all doing this." "Because it needs doing. Because those girls deserve a proper home. Because you've been hiding up here long enough, and it's time you remembered what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself." "I didn't deserve this. I shut everyone out for 5 years. And now you've let people in. That takes courage, Eli. More courage than hiding ever did." Doc clapped him on the shoulder. "Eat your food. We've got a lot of work left to do." The barn was finished by sunset. Not the detail work. That would come later. But the structure itself stood solid and strong, ready to shelter animals through the coming winter. It was bigger than the old barn, better built, a gift from people who'd given their time and sweat without expectation of repayment. Martha organized the departure as efficiently as she'd organized everything else, loading families back into wagons, distributing leftover food, making plans for the following week, when men would return to finish the interior. "You take care of those girls," she told Eli as her wagon prepared to leave, "and let people help you once in a while. It won't kill you." "Thank you, Martha, for everything." "Don't thank me. Just be the man those children need you to be." After the last wagon disappeared over the ridge, Eli stood in the gathering darkness, looking at the new barn, feeling the weight of community support settling over him like a warm blanket. Clara came to stand beside him, Rosie already asleep in her arms. "That really happened," she said quietly. "All those people came. They built us a barn." "They did. Nobody's ever done anything like that for us before. Things are different now." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to believe that. I really do. But part of me keeps waiting for something to go wrong, for all of this to be taken away." Eli understood that feeling better than she knew. The fear that happiness was just a setup for deeper pain. The inability to trust good things. "It might go wrong," he said honestly. "Life doesn't come with guarantees. But whatever happens, we face it together. That's the best anyone can do." "Is it enough?" He looked at her, this fierce, wounded girl who'd fought so hard to survive, and felt his heart crack open a little wider. "I think so. I hope so." She leaned her head against his shoulder, careful not to jostle Rosie. "Me too." The weeks that followed brought changes Eli hadn't anticipated. The legal guardianship papers came through, signed by Judge Harrison himself, making Clara and Rosie officially his wards. The investigation into Pinewood Mission expanded, uncovering years of abuse and neglect. Garrett Wade was transferred to the territorial prison to await trial. But the biggest change came on a Thursday afternoon in late June, when a wagon Eli didn't recognize rolled up his drive carrying 2 people he'd never seen before. A man and woman in their 50s, well-dressed, with the look of city folk unused to rough country roads. The woman clutched a leather bag against her chest, her face pale with travel sickness and something else. Something that looked like desperate hope. Eli met them in the yard, Clara hovering behind him with Rosie pressed against her legs. "Can I help you folks?" The man climbed down from the wagon and removed his hat. "We're looking for 2 girls, orphans from Pinewood Mission. Their names are Clara and Rosie Jennings." Eli's hand moved toward his rifle. "Who's asking?" "I'm Thomas Whitmore. This is my wife, Helen. We're the girls' aunt and uncle. Their mother was Helen's sister." Behind him, Eli heard Clara's sharp intake of breath.
That's not possible, Clara said, her voice shaking. Our family is dead. The mission told us everyone was dead.
Helen Whitmore stumbled down from the wagon, tears streaming down her face.
They told us you were dead too. Both of you. They said you died of the same fever that took Elizabeth and John. We held a memorial service. We mourned you for 3 years. 3 years?
Clara's face had gone white.
But we've been at the mission for 3 years. They never said anything about family looking for us.
Because they lied. Thomas's voice was heavy with controlled anger. We wrote letters, sent money for your care. They took everything and told us you'd passed. It wasn't until the investigation started that we learned the truth. Rosie tugged on Clara's dress.
Clara, who are these people?
Clara couldn't answer. She was staring at Helen Whitmore with an expression Eli couldn't read, her whole body trembling. Helen took a hesitant step forward.
You look so much like Elizabeth. My God, you could be her twin. And the little one.
Her voice broke.
She has John's eyes. I'd know those eyes anywhere. I don't remember you, Clara said flatly. If you're really our family, why don't I remember you? You were 7 when we last saw you. Rosie was only 2. We lived in Boston then, came to visit once a year when we could afford the journey. After your parents died, we moved to Denver, closer to where we thought you'd been buried. We wanted to be near you, even if it was just a grave. But there was no grave. No, because you were alive. You were alive and suffering, and we didn't know.
Helen's tears fell faster.
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry we didn't find you sooner. Eli watched the exchange with a cold feeling in his gut. These people were family, real family, blood family. They had more right to Clara and Rosie than he ever could.
Clara, he said quietly, do you want to go inside and talk?
She looked at him with terrified eyes.
What's going to happen?
Nothing's going to happen unless you want it to. But they've come a long way. Least we can do is hear them out. They sat around Eli's kitchen table, the same table where he'd first fed 2 desperate, freezing girls what felt like a lifetime ago. Helen couldn't stop staring at Clara and Rosie, drinking in every detail of their faces like she was memorizing them.
We came as soon as we learned the truth, Thomas explained. The investigation into Pinewood turned up all kinds of records. Letters they'd intercepted, money they'd stolen, lies they'd told to families who trusted them. We weren't the only ones.
Dozens of families were told their relatives had died when they hadn't.
Why?
Clara's voice was hard.
Why would they do that?
Money. Control. The more children they had, the more funding they received. The more isolated those children were, the easier they were to control. Thomas's jaw tightened. The people responsible are facing charges. It won't undo what happened, but at least there's some justice.
Justice,
Clara laughed bitterly.
Justice doesn't give us back 3 years, doesn't erase what we went through.
No, it doesn't. Helen reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Clara's hand.
But we want to make things right, as much as we can. How?
Helen glanced at her husband, then at Eli, then back to Clara.
We want you to come live with us, both of you. We have a nice house in Denver, good schools nearby. You'd want for nothing. We'd give you everything your mother would have wanted you to have.
The words hung in the air like smoke. Eli felt something in his chest collapse, even though he'd known this was coming from the moment the Whitmores identified themselves. Clara's face had gone pale.
Leave here?
Denver has opportunities this frontier can't offer. Education, society, a proper future for young ladies of good family.
But this is our home.
Rosie's small voice cut through the tension.
Mr. Eli is our family now. He saved us.
Helen's expression flickered with something complicated. Mr. Stone has been very kind. We're grateful for everything he's done. But he's not blood. He's not really your family." "Yes, he is." Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "He's more family than the people who left us to rot in that mission for 3 years." "Clara, that's not fair. We didn't know." "I know you didn't know. I know it's not your fault. But you can't just show up now, after everything we've been through, and expect us to leave the only person who ever actually took care of us." "We're not asking you to forget him. We just want a chance to know you, to be part of your lives. Then be part of our lives, but don't ask us to leave our home." Silence fell over the table. Eli sat very still, not trusting himself to speak, not wanting to influence a decision that wasn't his to make. Thomas cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should give everyone time to think. This is a lot to process, for all of us." "Where are you staying?" Eli asked, finally finding his voice. "The boarding house in town. We'll be there for a few days at least." "Good. Come back tomorrow. We can talk more then." After the Whitmores left, Clara burst into tears. Not quiet tears, but great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Eli held her while she cried. Rosie pressed between them, all three of them clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. "I don't want to go," Clara gasped. "I don't want to leave you. But they're family, real family. And maybe they could give us a better life. And I should want that for Rosie. And I don't know what to do." "You don't have to decide anything right now." "But they came all this way. They've been grieving us for 3 years. How can I tell them no?" Eli pulled back so he could look at her face. "Clara, listen to me. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. If you want to go to Denver, I'll help you pack. If you want to stay here, I'll fight for you. But this has to be your choice, yours and Rosie's, nobody else's. What do you want?" The question hit him square in the chest. What did he want? He wanted them to stay, wanted it so badly it felt like physical pain. But wanting wasn't the same as needing, and his needs weren't more important than theirs. "I want you to be happy," he said carefully. "I want you to have the best possible life. If that's in Denver with your aunt and uncle, then that's what I want for you. If that's here with me, then nothing would make me happier." Clara wiped her eyes. "That's not a real answer." "Yes, it is. It's the only honest answer I can give." Rosie tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Eli, do you want us to go away?" "No, sweetheart, I don't want you to go away. But sometimes what we want isn't what's best." "I don't want to go away either. I like it here. I like you. I like the chickens and the horse and my room and everything. Denver sounds scary." "Denver might not be scary once you got used to it." "But I don't want to get used to it. I want to stay here." Her lower lip trembled. "Why can't we just stay here?" Clara knelt beside her sister. "Because maybe Aunt Helen and Uncle Thomas can give you things Mr. Eli can't. Better schools, nicer clothes, more opportunities." "I don't care about opportunities. I care about being with people who love me." Rosie looked between them with fierce determination. "Mr. Eli loves us. I can tell. And we love him. That's more important than schools and clothes, isn't it?" Out of the mouths of babes. Eli felt tears prick his eyes for the first time in years. "Yeah, Rosie. That's more important." Clara sat back on her heels, her expression shifting. Something settled in her face, a decision being made. "We're staying," she said. "Here. With you. If you'll have us." "Clara, you should think about this more. I've thought about it my whole life. Every night at the mission, every time someone promised us a home and then changed their mind.
Every moment I've spent wondering if anyone would ever really want us." She stood and faced him directly. "You want us. Not because you have to, not because we're blood, but because you chose us. You fought for us. You took a bullet and a knife and a burning barn for us. That's worth more than any opportunity Denver can offer." Eli's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded, pulling both girls into his arms, holding them like he'd never let go. When the Whitmores returned the next day, Clara met them on the porch. "We're staying here," she said firmly, "with Mr. Eli. He's our father now, in every way that matters." Helen's face crumpled. "But we're your blood family. Your mother was my sister. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means you'll always have a place in our lives. You can visit whenever you want. Write letters. Be our aunt and uncle." Clara's voice softened. "But you can't be our parents. We already have one, and he's standing right here." Eli felt Helen's eyes on him, searching for something. Judgment, maybe. Accusation. But what he saw was something else entirely. Understanding. "You really love them," Helen said quietly. "More than anything. And they love you." "I hope so." Helen was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Elizabeth would have wanted them to be happy, would have wanted them to be loved. If you can give them that—" "I can. I will. For as long as I'm breathing." Thomas put his arm around his wife. "Then perhaps we should talk about how to make this work. Visits, correspondence, maybe summer stays when the girls are older. We don't have to be enemies, Mr. Stone. We all want the same thing." "What's that?" "For Clara and Rosie to have the best possible life." Thomas extended his hand. "Let's figure out how to give them that. Together." Eli shook his hand, feeling something ease in his chest. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A way forward that didn't require anyone to lose. "Together," he agreed. The Whitmores stayed in Silver Falls for a week. They visited every day, getting to know the nieces they'd thought were dead. Helen taught Clara needlepoint patterns she'd learned from Elizabeth. Thomas showed Rosie card tricks that made her shriek with laughter. Slowly, carefully, they built the foundation of a relationship that would grow over years. On their last day, Helen pressed a photograph into Clara's hands. "This was your mother on her wedding day. I want you to have it, so you never forget where you came from." Clara looked at the image, tears sliding down her cheeks. A young woman in a white dress, smiling at the camera with Clara's exact expression. The mother she'd lost, the family she'd mourned, preserved in fading paper. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finding us." "Thank you for letting us be part of your lives." Helen hugged her fiercely. "Be happy, Clara. Your mother would have wanted you to be happy." After the Whitmores' wagon disappeared over the ridge, Clara stood for a long time looking at the photograph. Eli waited beside her, giving her space to feel whatever she needed to feel. "I don't really remember her," Clara admitted quietly. "I have flashes sometimes. The smell of her perfume, the sound of her singing. But I can't picture her face. I couldn't even recognize her in this photo if Aunt Helen hadn't told me who she was." "That doesn't mean you loved her any less." "No, I guess not." Clara looked up at him. "Is it okay that I'm relieved they're gone? I know they're family. I know they love us. But when they're here, I feel like I have to be someone I'm not. Like I have to live up to who my mother was." "You don't have to be anyone but yourself. That's enough for me. It should be enough for anyone." Clara leaned against him, the photograph still clutched in her hands. "I'm glad we stayed." "Me too." "Do you think they'll really visit?
Or was that just something they said to make leaving easier? I think they meant it. They lost you once. They won't risk losing you again.
That's a lot of people to lose.
Clara's voice was thoughtful. Their sister, their brother-in-law, 2 nieces they thought were dead. 3 years of grief for nothing. Not for nothing. Grief shapes us, even when the reason for it changes. They became different people because they lost you. Maybe better people. More compassionate, more willing to fight for what matters. Is that what happened to you when you lost your wife? Eli considered the question carefully. I became worse for a long time. Harder. More closed off. But then you came along, and you made me better. Made me remember that love is worth the risk of loss. Clara smiled slightly. So we saved each other. Yeah, I guess we did. Rosie burst out of the cabin, her face lit up with excitement. Mr. Eli, Clara, Martha came by while you were outside. She brought a pie, a whole pie. Can we have some now, please? Clara laughed, the heaviness of the moment breaking. I suppose we can have some pie. Yay! And can I tell you about what Margaret did today? The chicken Margaret, not the picture Margaret. She laid 3 eggs. 3! That's a record. I think she's showing off because she knows she has a special name. Eli let Rosie drag him toward the cabin, Clara following behind with a photograph still in her hands. Inside, Martha's pie sat on the table, a note attached that read, "For my favorite family." Favorite family. Eli looked around his cabin, at the signs of life that filled every corner. Rosie's drawings, Clara's mending basket, 3 chairs at a table built for one. A home that had been dead for 5 years, brought back to life by 2 desperate girls who'd knocked on his door in a blizzard. Who wants the first slice? Clara asked, picking up the knife. Me! Rosie's hand shot up. Me! 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 Use your manners. Please me! Please me! 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 Clara rolled her eyes, but cut a generous slice for her sister. Then one for Eli. Then one for herself. They sat together at the table, eating pie, listening to Rosie's elaborate stories about chicken politics and horse personalities, and all the small, precious details of a life that finally felt safe. Outside, summer was in full bloom. The new barn stood solid against the sky. The garden was producing more vegetables than they could eat. The world kept turning, indifferent to their small dramas, but somehow kinder than it had been before. Eli reached across the table and took Clara's hand in his, Rosie's in the other. I'm grateful, he said quietly, for both of you, for this life we're building, for everything. Clara squeezed his fingers. So are we. So are we so much, Rosie added, through a mouthful of pie. Don't talk with your mouth full. But I have important things to say. Then swallow first. Rosie swallowed dramatically, then grinned. I love you. Both of you. That's the important thing. I love our family. Eli felt his heart expand to hold more than he'd ever thought possible. I love our family too, he said. And for the first time and longer than he could remember, he meant it without fear. The summer faded into autumn, and with it came the final piece of business Eli had been avoiding. Judge Harrison was due in Silver Falls the 2nd week of October, making his circuit through the territory. Thomas Reed had been preparing the paperwork for months, gathering testimony, documenting everything from the night 2 freezing girls had knocked on Eli's door to the barn raising that proved the community's support. It's just a formality, Reed assured him during their final meeting before the hearing. The emergency guardianship is already in place. The Whitmores have submitted written consent. The mission's been shut down, so there's no one to contest. This is just making it official. Just making it official, Eli repeated. The words felt heavy on his tongue. You nervous? Should I be? No, but I suspect you are anyway. He was. More nervous than he'd been facing Garrett Wade in the firelight. More nervous than he'd been watching his barn burn to the ground. Because this mattered in ways those things hadn't. This was permanent. This was forever. Clara found him on the porch that evening, staring at nothing, his coffee gone cold in his hands. You're worried about the hearing. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar, Mr. Eli. She sat beside him on the step, close enough that their shoulders touched. In the months since she'd arrived, she'd grown taller, filled out with regular meals and safety. She looked less like a hunted animal now, and more like the young woman she was becoming. What if he says no? Eli asked quietly. The judge. What if he decides I'm not fit to raise you? Then we'll figure something out. We always do. You'd fight it? Clara turned to look at him with those two old eyes. I'd fight anything that tried to take us away from you. Don't you know that by now? I know you've had to fight too much already. This would be different. This would be fighting for something good, not just fighting to survive. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Besides, the judge would have to be blind and stupid to think you're not fit. You're the best father anyone could ask for. The word still caught him off guard sometimes. Father. He'd never expected to hear it again after Margaret died. Had never imagined anyone would use it to describe him. I don't know about best. I do. Rosie does. That's what matters. Inside, they could hear Rosie singing to herself, some made-up song about chickens and stars and family. Her voice carried through the walls, bright and unself-conscious in a way she'd never been at the mission. She's happy, Clara said. Really happy. Do you know how rare that is? For a child who's been through what she's been through? You made that happen. Taking care of her, protecting her all those years. We made it happen. Together. Clara's voice was fierce. You gave us a place to be happy. You gave us safety and love and a future. That's not nothing, Mr. Eli. That's everything. The hearing took place in the back room of the Silver Falls Courthouse, a grand name for what was really just a large wooden building that served multiple purposes depending on the day. Judge Harrison sat behind a desk that had seen better decades, his weathered face impassive as he reviewed the stack of documents before him. Eli sat at a table, with Clara and Rosie on either side of him, their hands gripping his beneath the surface. Thomas Reed stood nearby, ready to speak if needed. In the gallery, such as it was, Martha Perkins had organized a contingent of supporters, including Doc Patterson, Reverend Miller, Sheriff Dawson, and at least a dozen others who'd helped rebuild the barn. Mr. Stone, Judge Harrison began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of frontier justice. You're petitioning for full legal adoption of Clara and Rosie Jennings, currently your wards under emergency guardianship. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And you understand that this would make you their father in the eyes of the law, responsible for their welfare, their education, their future until they reach majority? I understand. Tell me, Mr. Stone, why do you want to adopt these children? Eli had prepared answers for this. Practical answers about stability and security and the importance of legal protection. But sitting here, with Clara's hand trembling in his and Rosie's small fingers wrapped around his thumb, the prepared words felt hollow. Because they're my daughters, he said simply. Not by blood, but by everything else. They came into my life when I'd given up on living, and they made me remember what it meant to care about something. I don't want to adopt them because it's the right thing to do, or because it'll protect them legally. I want to adopt them because I love them, because they're mine and I'm theirs. Because family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing each other every single day. His voice roughened. I spent 5 years hiding from the world after I lost my wife and child. Thought I'd never feel anything again. Then these two showed up on my porch in a blizzard, and everything changed. They saved me as much as I saved them. More, probably. And I can't imagine my life without them anymore. Don't want to imagine it. Judge Harrison's expression remained unreadable. Clara, you're old enough to have a say in this matter. Do you wish to be adopted by Mr. Stone? Clara stood, her chin lifted, her voice steady.
Yes, sir. More than anything.
Why?
Because he's the first person who ever made me feel like I was worth something. The first person who didn't just see an orphan to be pitied or a burden to be managed. He saw me, the real me, and he wanted me anyway.
Her voice wavered slightly.
At the mission, they taught us that family was blood and blood was everything. That without blood relatives, we'd always be outsiders. But
Eli showed me that's not true. Family is the people who show up for you when everything falls apart. Family is the people who fight for you, even when it's hard. Family is choosing to love someone and keep choosing them every single day. That's what Mr. Eli does. That's who he is. And I want to be his daughter. Officially. Forever. Judge Harrison turned to Rosie. And you, young lady? Do you understand what's happening here? Rosie stood on her chair so she could see the judge better.
You're deciding if Mr. Eli gets to be our pa for real. Like, with papers and everything.
That's correct. And do you want Mr. Eli to be your father?
He already is my father. He just doesn't have the papers yet.
Rosie's brow furrowed with the intensity of a child making an important point.
He reads to us every night. He taught me to ride a horse. He makes sure we eat breakfast even when we're not hungry. He held me when I had nightmares and told me the monsters weren't real.
He fought a bad man to keep us safe.
She crossed her arms. That's what fathers do. So he's already our father. You're just making it official.
A ripple of quiet laughter went through the gallery. Even Judge Harrison's stern face softened slightly. I see. The judge shuffled through more papers. I have here testimony from numerous citizens of Silver Falls, attesting to Mr. Stone's character and his care for these children. I have records of the emergency guardianship, which has been in effect for 8 months without incident. I have written consent from Thomas and Helen Whitmore, the children's blood relatives, supporting this adoption. And I have the documented history of the Pinewood Mission's failures, which makes it clear these children were failed by every institution that should have protected them. He looked up, his eyes moving from Eli to Clara to Rosie and back again. In my years on the bench, I've seen many families, some bound by blood, who treated each other like strangers, some bound by law, who never developed genuine affection, and some, rare and precious, bound by nothing but choice and love. He set down his papers. This appears to be one of the latter. Eli's heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. Mr. Stone, it is the judgment of this court that your petition for adoption is granted. From this moment forward, Clara and Rosie Jennings are legally Clara and Rosie Stone, your daughters in the eyes of the law and the territory of Wyoming. The words washed over Eli like warm water. He felt Clara grip his hand tighter, heard Rosie let out a small squeal of joy, but couldn't quite process what had just happened.
It's done?
He managed. It's done. Judge Harrison allowed himself a small smile. Congratulations, Mr. Stone. Take good care of those girls.
I will, sir. I swear I will.
The gallery erupted into applause. Martha was crying openly. Doc Patterson was grinning like a fool. Sheriff Dawson gave Eli a solemn nod of approval that meant more than any words could have. But Eli barely noticed any of it. because Rosie had launched herself into his arms, wrapping around him like a vine, and Clara had pressed her face against his shoulder, her tears soaking through his shirt. And nothing else in the world mattered except this moment, this family, this love that had grown from desperation and blossomed into something unbreakable. "We're really yours now," Clara whispered. "Really, really yours." "You've always been mine," Eli said, his voice thick. "Papers just make it harder for anyone to argue."
Pa,
Rosie pulled back to look at him with shining eyes.
I get to call you Pa now. For real. Forever.
"You've been calling me Pa for months."
But now it's official. It's different when it's official.
She threw her arms around his neck again.
I love you, Pa. I love you so much.
"I love you too, Rosie. Both of you. More than I know how to say." The celebration afterward was modest but meaningful. Martha had organized food at the boarding house, and half the town seemed to show up to congratulate them. Eli shook hands until his arm ached, accepted hugs from women he barely knew, listened to men tell him he was doing a good thing. But the best part was watching his daughters move through the crowd, being welcomed, being celebrated, being seen as part of something larger than themselves. Clara had found a group of young women around her age and was talking with them. Actually talking, not just watching warily from the edges. Her laughter rang out occasionally, surprising and beautiful. Rosie had adopted Doc Patterson's grandchildren as her new best friends, and was currently explaining the complicated social dynamics of her chicken coop with intense seriousness. "You did good," Martha said, appearing at Eli's elbow with a plate of food he hadn't asked for. "Those girls needed you."
I needed them more.
"Maybe so. Doesn't matter who needed who more. What matters is you found each other." She pressed the plate into his hands. "Eat something. You're too skinny. Always have been." "Yes, ma'am." She patted his arm and moved on to direct some aspect of the celebration that wasn't meeting her standards. Eli stood alone for a moment, watching this family, feeling a peace he'd thought he'd never find again. The ride home that evening was quiet but content. Rosie fell asleep against Eli's shoulder before they'd gone a mile, exhausted by excitement and socializing. Clara sat on his other side, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "What are you thinking about?" Eli asked.
Mama, Papa, what they would think if they could see us now.
"What do you think they'd think?" Clara was quiet for a long moment.
I think they'd be glad we found you. I think they'd be grateful someone was there to catch us when they couldn't be anymore.
Her voice softened.
I think Mama would like you.
"You remind me of Papa in some ways. Quiet, strong, the kind of man who shows love through actions instead of words. I talk plenty. You talk when you need to. That's different from talking just to fill silence." She smiled slightly. Papa was like that. He'd go hours without saying anything, then come out with something that made you think about it for days. "Sounds like a good man." He was. You would have liked each other. They rode in silence for a while longer. The only sounds the horses' hooves and Rosie's soft breathing.
Pa?
Clara's voice was hesitant. "Yeah?"
Can I ask you something? Something I've been wondering about for a while?
You can ask me anything.
Do you still miss her? Your wife?
The question hit him somewhere deep, in a place that hadn't fully healed and probably never would. But it didn't hurt the way it used to. The sharp edges had worn smooth over time, grief transforming into something quieter, more bearable.
Every day, he admitted. I'll always miss her. She was the best thing that ever happened to me, and losing her nearly destroyed me. Does it make you sad that we're here, instead of the family you were supposed to have?
Eli pulled the wagon to a stop, needing to give this question the attention it deserved. He shifted so he could look at Clara directly. "Listen to me carefully," because I'm only going to say this once. You and Rosie are not a replacement for the family I lost. You're not a consolation prize or a second choice. You're your own people, your own family, and I love you for exactly who you are." His voice roughened with emotion. "Margaret would have loved you. I know that in my bones. She would have fought for you the same way I did. She would have been so proud of who you're becoming. And if she could see us now, see this family we've built, she wouldn't be sad. She'd be grateful. Because she always said the worst thing about dying was leaving me alone."
And I'm not alone anymore. Clara's eyes were swimming with tears. "You really believe that?"
"I really believe that." She leaned against him, careful not to wake Rosie.
"I wish I could have met her."
"Me too. But in a way, you already know her. Everything good I do, everything kind, everything patient, I learned from her. So every time I show you love, you're meeting a piece of Margaret." Clara wiped her eyes. "That's a nice way to think about it." "It's the true way." They sat together in the gathering dusk, 3 people, bound not by blood, but by something stronger. Choice, commitment, the daily decision to show up for each other, no matter what. "We should get home," Clara finally said. "Rosie's going to be impossible to wake up if she sleeps much longer." "Let her sleep. I can carry her in." "She's getting too big for that." "She'll never be too big for that." Clara smiled, and Eli clicked his tongue to start the horse moving again. Home. They were going home. The months that followed were the happiest of Eli's life. Fall harvest brought abundance, more than they could eat, enough to trade and store for winter. Clara proved herself invaluable in the garden and the kitchen, her cooking improving until even Martha admitted she might have some competition. Rosie started school in Silver Falls, coming home each day bursting with stories about her teacher, her friends, the things she was learning. The Whitmores wrote regularly, and the girls wrote back. Helen sent packages at holidays, little gifts and keepsakes that connected Clara and Rosie to the mother they barely remembered. Thomas enclosed money sometimes, which Eli put into an account for the girls' futures. They were building a relationship that worked, not as a replacement for what they had with Eli, but as an addition to it. Christmas that year was unlike any Eli had experienced since Margaret's death. The girls insisted on decorating the cabin with pine boughs and handmade ornaments. Rosie made paper snowflakes until every surface was covered with them. Clara baked cookies from a recipe Helen had sent, their mother's recipe, and cried a little when they came out just right. Eli carved wooden gifts in secret, a horse for Rosie, a jewelry box for Clara. Nothing fancy, but made with love and care. On Christmas morning, they sat together by the fire, exchanging presents, eating too many cookies, existing in a bubble of warmth and joy that felt almost impossible. "Best Christmas ever," Rosie declared, hugging her wooden horse to her chest. "You said that last year too," Clara pointed out. "That was before we had Pa. This is the first Christmas with Pa. It's different." "Different how?" "More complete." Rosie looked at Eli with such pure love that his heart ached. "Like we have all the pieces now. Before, we were trying to make a picture, but some pieces were missing. Now we have them all." Clara reached over and took Eli's hand. "She's right. This is the first time in years that I haven't felt like something was missing." Eli looked at his daughters, at the home they'd built together, at the life that had grown from the ashes of grief and desperation. "Me too," he said. "Me too." Winter passed. Spring arrived. A year since that first desperate knock on his door, though it felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. Eli marked the anniversary quietly, walking to the spot where he'd first seen Clara and Rosie standing in the blizzard. The porch had been repaired since then, the whole cabin improved by a community that had embraced them as their own. Clara found him there as the sun set. "You're thinking about that night." "Hard not to. Everything changed because of that night." She stood beside him, almost as tall as his shoulder now, growing up so fast. "I almost didn't knock. Did I ever tell you that?" "No."
I stood there for almost a minute, trying to get the courage. I was so sure you'd turn us away. Everyone else had. Why would you be different? She wrapped her arms around herself. But Rosie was dying. I could feel her getting weaker with every minute. So I knocked, because even a small chance was better than no chance. "I'm glad you did." "Me too." She paused. "What would you have done if I hadn't? If we'd walked on, found somewhere else, or—" "Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't think about that." "I have to sometimes, because it reminds me how close we came to losing everything. How one small choice changed all our lives." "One small choice." Eli nodded slowly. "That's all it takes, isn't it? One moment of courage, one decision to try, and everything shifts. You made a choice too, to open the door, to let us in, to keep us." Clara's voice was thick. "Thank you for making that choice, for choosing us." "I'd make it again, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times." "I know." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "That's what makes you our father." Rosie burst out of the cabin, shattering the solemn moment with her usual energy. "Pa, Clara, dinner's burning! I tried to save it, but I think I made it worse." Clara sighed. "I told her to just watch it, not touch anything." "I was watching it, but then it started smoking, and I thought I should do something, and—" I'm coming." Clara headed inside, leaving Eli alone with Rosie. The little girl looked up at him with Margaret's eyes, with a smile that was all her own. 7 years old now, no longer the fever-flushed child who'd nearly died on his floor. "Are you sad, Pa? You look sad." "Not sad, just remembering." "Remembering what?" "The night you came. How scared I was." "You were scared?" Rosie looked astonished. "But you're never scared." "Everyone gets scared, sweetheart. Even fathers. Especially fathers. Because fathers have people they love, and loving people means being scared of losing them." Rosie considered this with characteristic intensity. "But you didn't lose us." "No, I didn't. And you won't, because we're stones now, and stones don't break easy." Eli laughed, surprising himself. "Where'd you hear that?" "I made it up, just now. But it's true, isn't it? Stones are strong. We're strong. Our family's strong." "Yeah, Rosie, we're strong." She grabbed his hand and tugged. "Come inside. Clara saved the dinner. She says you have to help set the table because it's your turn." "Yes, ma'am." "And after dinner, will you read to us? The Rip Van Winkle story again? I like that one." "If that's what you want." "It's what I want." She grinned up at him. "I love you, Pa." The words that had terrified him once now felt as natural as breathing. "I love you too, Rosie. More than you'll ever know." They walked inside together, to dinner, to Clara's scolding and laughing, to the warm chaos of family life. The cabin that had been a tomb was now a home. The man who had been a ghost was now a father. And the girls who had been orphans were daughters, beloved and wanted and safe. Outside, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched 2 desperate children trudge through a blizzard toward an uncertain future. The same stars that had witnessed a broken man choose love over fear. And somewhere, Eli liked to think, Margaret was watching too, smiling at the family he'd built from the ruins
of the one they'd lost. Knowing that her death hadn't destroyed him after all. Knowing that love, once planted, could grow in the most unlikely soil. The night Clara and Rosie knocked on his door, Eli had been waiting to die. Now, 1 year later, he was finally living. He sat at his table with his daughters, eating a dinner they'd salvaged together, listening to Rosie's chatter and Clara's wry responses, feeling the simple, profound miracle of being exactly where he belonged. This was what family meant. Not blood, not obligation, not the circumstances of birth. Just people choosing each other, day after day, through fear and fire and everything in between. Just love, making itself known through 1,000 small choices. Just 3 broken people who had found their way to wholeness together. And that, Eli knew with absolute certainty, was more than enough. It was everything.